I think we're ready to go, Marie.
Okay. Greetings, my name is Marita Poole, and I am the director and curator at Clark Atlanta University Art Museum. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's program, which is the second public event for the new MississippiS project and the main event for the African American Read-In at Augusta University. The new MississippiS project is a collaboration between Augusta University's English and World Languages Department, Clark Atlanta University Art Museum, the Lighthouse Company in Paris, France, and the Margaret Walker Center at Jackson State University. It explores the intersection of environmental and sociopolitical injustice along the Mississippi River with a specific emphasis on the state of Mississippi as an exploration of these issues in the American South. Before we begin, I would like to thank Clark Atlanta University and the Bridge Ahead Initiative, a program created by Art Bridges Foundation, for their financial support. I would like to express my gratitude to my fellow participants in the new MississippiS project, Angela Funderburk, Robert Luckett, Angela Stewart at the Margaret Walker Center, Sarita Williams and Girdex Massé at Augusta University, Clemence Al and Duncan Avenue at the Lighthouse Company, and my assistants, Diamond Mason and Grace Gardner. But most of all, I would like to express my appreciation to Kiese Laymon and Jesmyn Ward for their willingness to be a part of this journey, to learn to explore the distinctiveness of artistic and literary traditions inspired by Mississippi and the American South. The format for the program will be explained by my co-host, Girdex Massé. Dr. Massé is an assistant professor who teaches in the English and World Languages Department at Augusta University. He specializes in African American and African diaspora literatures in Anglophone and Francophone contexts. So without further delay, I'm passing the baton to Dr. Massé. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Poole. And before I begin introducing the speakers, I would like to briefly say a word about the structure. I want to say a quick, so we're staging essentially a 45 to 50-minute conversation between two writers who also, we've learned, happen to be very good friends. We sent some themes we wanted them to address, as well as some questions. The themes are: 1, the relationship to landscape and land; 2, their connection to Mississippi writers from the 20th century; 3, sociopolitical injustice; 4, trauma, healing, and their practice as writers; and the last theme is home, specifically the decision to return to and remain in the American South. I will point to some specific questions. We forward them if need be to the conversation. We will also have about 50 minutes for audience Q&A at the end. And in order to submit your questions, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Okay. All right. A MacArthur genius, a 2-time National Book Award winner, and one of Time Magazine's 100 Most Influential People of 2018, Jesmyn Ward has established herself over the last decade as one of our most celebrated writers of fiction and nonfiction. In 2017, she became the first woman and first person of color to win the National Book Award for fiction twice, joining the ranks of William Faulkner, Saul Bellow, John Cheever, Philip Roth, and John Updike. Ward's novels, primarily set on the Mississippi's Gulf Coast, are deeply informed by the trauma of Hurricane Katrina, as well as her nuanced, rich, and vivid understanding of working-class Black life in the rural South in the post-civil rights period. Since the 2008 publication of the debut novel, Where the Line Bleeds, Ward's fiction has continually captivated readers by the power of his grit and tenderness. The second novel, Salvage the Bones, winner of the 2011 National Book Award, is a troubling but ultimately empowering tale of familial bonds set amid the chaos of the hurricane. A most recent volume of fiction, Sing, Unburied Sing, won the 2017 National Book Award. It has been described as, quote, a searing, urgent read for anyone who thinks the shadows of slavery and Jim Crow have passed, end of quote. Ward's nonfiction include the acclaimed memoir, Man We Beat, which the New York Times Book Review has called, quote, beautiful, raw, and powerful, end of quote. The work deals with the loss of 5 young men in life to drugs, accidents, suicide, and the bad luck that follows people who live in poverty. She is also editor of a New York Times bestselling anthology entitled The Fire This Time, A New Generation Speaks About Race. The most recent publication is Navigate Your Stars, an adaptation of a 2018 Tulane University commencement speech that champions the value of hard work and the importance of respect for oneself and others. Now, if that were not enough, Ward is also a professor of creative writing at Tulane University and a contributing editor of Vanity Fair. Kiese Laymon is an acclaimed writer hailing from Jackson, Mississippi. In his sharply observant, often hilarious work, Mr. Laymon does battle with the personal and the political, race and family, body and shame, poverty and place. His savage humor and clear eye perceptiveness have heard them comparisons to Mark Twain and Ta-Nehisi Coates. Recalling her first time reading Laymon's work, the writer, academic, and critic Roxane Gay noted, quote, I was stunned into stillness. Then I reread the essay and was stunned into stillness again, end of quote. Laymon's 2018 best-selling memoir, Heavy, an American memoir, won the Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Nonfiction and the Christopher Isherwood Prize for autobiographical prose. The audiobook, which I can attest is worth purchasing, even if you already have a copy of Heavy. It makes the narrative come alive, really. It's a beautiful audiobook, so his audiobook has won the Audible Audiobook of the Year. Booklist has called his memoir, quote, spectacular, artfully crafted, miraculously personal, and continuously disarming, end of quote. Heavy was named a best book of 2018 by the New York Times, Publishers Weekly, NPR, Broadly, BuzzFeed, The Washington Post, Entertainment Weekly, and more. It was also a finalist for the Hurston Wright Legacy Award in Nonfiction and the Kirkus Prize in Nonfiction. Laymon is also the author of How to Slowly Kill Yourself and Others in America, a collection of lacerating essays on race, violence, celebrity, family, and creativity that was published in 2013, and that has also been reissued by his new publisher, Scribner. And if you're purchasing his work, please be sure to publish it through Scribner. Essays from this collection have been included in the Best American Series and the Atlantic's Best Essays. Laymon has also journeyed into fiction. In 2013, he published his debut novel, Long Division. The work combines elements of science fiction, satire, and social commentary. It was selected as one of the best books of 2013 of 2013 by BuzzFeed, Salon, the Chicago Tribune, Library Journal, Guernica, and others. It has also been reissued this year. A contributing writer, editor for Vanity Fair, Laymon is the current recipient of the Radcliffe Fellowship at Harvard. He is also a distinguished professor who teaches at the University of Mississippi. I know we cannot clap, but welcome you in whatever way we can. Please help us welcome Ms. Ward, Mr. Laymon. It's a wonderful pleasure to have them both here with us. Thank you for being here.
Oh, all right, cuz, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Thank you. I think we probably should start by thanking Dr. Massey and Dr. Poole, thanking Clark Atlanta, thanking Augusta University, and thanking home team for me, Margaret Walker Center at Jackson State University. I grew up in that building. So just the fact that all of y'all could collaborate and bring us here to talk and listen to one another means a lot to me. So, I get giddy every time we talk, Fib. So thank you for being here too, Jesmyn. Can we start though, yo, by talking about this added S on the Mississippis? We started to talk about this last time we talked publicly. So I want to jump in and kind of ask this question about the various Mississippis. Like growing up on the coast, did you all see like Northern Mississippi and Jackson as not just a part of Mississippi, but a part and parcel of like you? I've been thinking about that question a lot since they asked us to talk today.
I don't know whether we like saw Northern Mississippi and Central Mississippi, like up where Jackson is, necessarily as a part of our Mississippi. I mean, where the coast is just so, it seems like a very different place to me than Central Mississippi and Northern Mississippi. For various reasons, right? Because of the landscape, it's very wet down where we are, like having not only are we on the Gulf, but then there's also a ton of rivers, also bayous and marshes, and it's just that landscape itself is very different. And you have like the man-made beaches and culturally it seemed a bit different too. I mean, Mississippi is Mississippi.
Right.
Comes to, the history of the place and racism and structural inequality. Mississippi is Mississippi across the line, right? But it felt different when we went from the coast up to Central Mississippi and then into Northern Mississippi. Like when I was in junior high and high school, and and I used to travel with the basketball team, and when we would go up to Central and Northern Mississippi, like we just knew it was worse, and we knew that we felt that it was worse, and we felt that we would sort of run into more racist, I think more overt, like hostile racism, interpersonal racism, than we did on the coast.
Yeah.
And that's just, I don't know, an awareness that we had, and several times, like, crazy things did happen at basketball games with people, I don't know. But then again, like I went to this small, mostly white, like overwhelmingly majority white high school, right? So, and there were a couple of Black players, on the basketball teams, right? And so, and we were playing these little like segregation high schools, right? And so here we would come up there and there'd be Black people on our team, right? But nobody Black on, on these teams that, that played for these little segregation high schools. And so, they'd be screaming nigger and throwing stuff on the basketball floor. And it was crazy. So, it felt like a different, like the Central Mississippi, Northern Mississippi felt like a different place. But like, when I talk about Parchman, I always say like the pressure that the awareness of Parchman exerted we still felt that on the coast, you know, just because we weren't in central northern Mississippi.
Yeah, it's weird to know that. I mean, I don't know how weird it is, but it's interesting at least to know that, you know, I was born in that middle part of central Mississippi. Like I told you before, I never spent any time in the north except when I went to the Delta. And the coast, you know, pre Chris Jackson, who Abdul Rauf, who before he was Abdul Rauf, we know him as Chris Jackson. Like, we didn't know what the fuck was going on down there on the coast. You know what I'm trying to tell you? Like, we would visit and we saw, and the thing that kind of disoriented me as a young person was like the Gulf. You know what I mean? And when I went down there like maybe 2 summers ago, and you were doing something, but I went to your home bookstore.
Past books, yeah.
Yeah, fam. And like, I was like, oh shit, like Jesmyn literally lives on the water. You know what I mean? Like the water right there. And so for us, you know, the river, we had creeks and whatnot. But I'm bringing up Chris Jackson to say, when Chris Jackson was showing the world that he was the best basketball player in the world, we didn't think, oh, he belonged to the coast. You know what I mean? We thought the coast cultivated that talent. Yeah. But we thought like, oh, that's us. You know? But I don't know if we had any, I don't know if we deserve to call Chris us. But for me, it had everything to do with some of what we still dealing with in the South, which was the nation looking down at us, thought that we weren't even good in this thing that we had been good in for, you know, basketball, like basketball and football. We've been doing our thing for the longest. And I thought, wow, like he's showing them that we down here can do it. But then I was like, but what must that feel like for people who are actually of Gulfport or, you know, the coast?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think in that respect, I think that we all feel the same way. I mean, I am not, you know, the biggest sports fan. But like, I know that you know, people in my family and my community have felt that about, you know, like all the athletes that come out of Mississippi, or even when we're talking about, you know, writers, you know, when I was a kid, like I felt that way about Ann Moody. I felt that way, you know, like I felt that way about the writers who I encountered who came, you know, from Mississippi, even if they weren't from the coast. Like I felt that ownership and feeling like they were from, you know, like we were from the same place. We were from that same Mississippi.
And so, you know, what I've been thinking about lately, a lot, this is before we were actually invited to get this conversation, is like, what is that thing that connects? I sort of want to talk about all writers, but I want to talk about Black writers more specifically, like, because though I think there are different Mississippis, I'm telling you, fam, like when I read some shit, like I can tell when the person is from home, you know? And I'm not sure what that thing is, but I wonder sometimes if that thing is, I wonder how much that thing has to do with like what I call like the worst of white folk. And I know that like the worst of white folk are everywhere in this world, but there seems to be some, and the wonderful traditions we come from, there seems to be something about the tradition we come from and the traditions that we have to fight up against when brought forth by white folk, that makes, like, you know, writing that comes from the Mississippi sort of feel cohesive, even if stylistically it seems so different. But I don't want to give all that to white folk. You know what I mean? I don't want to make it seem like we're all reactionary too.
Yeah.
But I don't know how else to think about it right now.
Yeah. I think that is definitely a part of like what is at the heart of it.
Yeah.
I think too that that often the voice, right, of the work, you know, like as soon as I read something by somebody from home, it's like it's someone I know from home telling me a story. There's something about the language, something about the voice. Maybe you know, you can break it down to the rhythm of the sentences and the rhythm of the paragraphs and the details that you know that are familiar, you know, that feel like memories when you read them, you know, because they just strike you as things that, you know, that you've experienced. So I don't know, to me that's part of it. I think that might be part of it too.
And when I think about the rhythm, fam, like, and this is where I got to stop myself, because I get so enchanted talking about your shit that I forget what we here for. But what we here for is partially to talk about your shit. So one of the things that I am amazed at with your work, and this is connected to the conversation of Mississippi's and the environment. It's like it took me 20 years of attempting to write fiction to realize that those forests that I placed those characters in needed to in some way be characterized, right? Like my descriptions of that forest needed to hold a similar rhythm to the conversation between the characters. And it seems that you understood that a lot earlier, right? Like the natural world not only needed to be described, but animated or accepted as animated. And I haven't asked you this before, but like, did that shit just come natural? Oh, not natural. I hate that word when we're talking to each other. Did that come easy for you to describe the natural world with the rhythm and the invigorating like layers that you create with the natural world? Was that something you came into fiction writing doing, or was that something you had to pick up along the way?
I mean, I think it's like both. I think it's something that I learned because I was probably in a way sort of imitating some of the books that I read by people who I admired, and so like trying to to figure out how to render the world and make it real, and then using the writers who I loved, like using them as as inspiration. But then too, I think, like I grew up, DeLille, which is my hometown, back in the 80s, like it was a very rural place. It's a bit more settled now because every time there's a hurricane, it like pushes the population of the coast like further north,
Yes.
and so like the places that were country before become more settled because people are sort of fleeing. They're trying to get away from the water. And next time there's a big storm surge, they don't want to be flooded. They don't want to lose everything that they have, and so people move north. But so DeLille, in the 80s, is a place where I grew up. Like, when I grew up in the 80s, we had one television in the whole house. It had 2 channels.
Right.
A lot of people lived in my house. There were at various times 14 people living in my grandmother's 4-bedroom house.
Yeah.
So, when we were kids, like the grown-ups would be like, if we were home, we were not in school, they'd be like, go outside and play. Go outside and play. So I spent a lot of time, when I was a kid, just outside, out in the actually in the forest and in the woods, and we would make up games, and so I think in the then I'm probably being influenced, like also I'm probably gonna say this next part because when I was a kid, I loved fantasy, like that was my thing. That was one of the I think genres that I fell in love with when I was a kid, and I learned how to read, in 2nd grade, 3rd grade, like I'm reading fantasy books and just loving them. And so I think for me, the natural landscape, it always seemed to have a magical quality, like it always seemed to, there seemed to be secrets there and history there and like hidden worlds beyond the world that I could see.
Yes.
And so I think that I probably bought some of that, probably, that feeling that I always would get, like in natural places, like in the landscape, in the environment, like that's, I don't know, like that. I think I bought that understanding of that the natural world as a dynamic place, with layers and texture to my work. And so I don't know. So I guess it was always really important to me to render it so that it had that texture, and so that it gave it, and so that so that you maybe felt as a reader, that there was something hidden, something secret, something magical, you know, some history there.
And you know, I think sometimes I at least just underestimate what it means to what it means to read Black bookmaking or Black literature that starts with Black characters outside, as your work, some of your work tends to do, you know. And it's sometimes we don't even have the words. Like when I first encountered that, I didn't even have the words. I was just overwhelmed by like, oh shit, like we can do that. Like we can talk, we can accept one of the hard truths of our lives, which shouldn't be hard at all, which is like grandmama used to say, take your ass outside, right? And don't come back smelling like outside. You know? So like, I don't never know what that means. But you know what, when you just said that about the magicalness of it, I think part of what I am so just obsessed with in Mississippi writing, and that doesn't mean it's specific to Mississippi, but it feels specific to Mississippi to me, is this idea that yes, like the forest and the environment are so steeped in what we call magic. And in lots of those forests, and some of those forests, and too many of those forests, you know, like our people were hanging from trees in those forests, right? Like, that shit is beyond magical. I think sometimes we tint magic with this like positive understanding. And antithetical to that, for me coming up, you know, I was raised by my mama, but mostly by my granny. And my granny was in these white folks' house cooking, and she started working in their plants and shit. And I was just like, this white folk, at least moneyed white people in my town, they get to have my granny cook for them. They get to have my granny change their fucking baby's diapers. They get to have my granny do whatever the fuck they want to say. They have come to the conclusion that my grandmama is a great decision maker, right? They tell her all of these things to remind her of that. But yet they didn't want to send their kids to school with her children.
Yeah.
And so for me, like as a young person, that shit was magic. I was like, what the like that's illogical, fam. Like anybody who had the opportunity to spend time with my granny and what she created, I just thought was like the luckiest person in the world. So like I was just like, oh, that's some magical shit. Like these people had the opportunity and they're like, nah, we want you for this, this, and this, but we don't want to send our kid. And so for me, early on, it let me know something was wrong with them folks, man. You know what I'm saying? And so sometimes when I read this literature, it's like I see authors trying to make the reader understand like all of the machinations of it. But like, I don't know about you, but early on, I was like, "That something wrong with these motherfuckers," because we have provided them the best of us.
Yeah.
And in the face of the best of us, they decided we don't want to be around y'all. And more than that, we want to fucking punish you for treating us better than we ever should be treated. Yeah. I think that is a part of what makes my Mississippi right in Mississippi. It's not all of it, but I wonder if you had similar understandings coming up too.
I think I did, and I think that it was often that I felt the same way when I read great Black, writers, like when I read, Toni Morrison for the first time, when I'm reading Alice Walker, like I talked about Anne Moody earlier, like when I read Richard Wright for the first time. So I'm reading all these, incredible Black authors in this work, and just, sinking into the experience of that work and then just being blown away by it, right? And then also seeing all the beauty in it and all the power in it, right? Yeah. And so like at the same time, here I am, interacting with people, my peers at the time who some of them like were very racist, right? And who, also like you're talking about, like has access to this beautiful thing, right? Or could if they wanted to, but instead, won't engage with it, won't read it, right? Can't appreciate the beauty and the power of it. I felt that way all the time, like when I was a kid, about music, like when like Black Southern rap, I mean, this is before David Banner, because right? But like this is like, back when 8 Ball and MJG,
oh Lord, yes,
Outkast, like all of them. And I remember like riding with my best friend, and he had the smallest Toyota with the biggest speakers in the back. Speakers in the back. So we'd be riding around and the music would be, I mean, he'd be playing it like the volumes all the way up, right? And I would just feel this like just joy, you know, like you talk about joy a lot, right? And that's what it was. It was just this joy, you know, this magnificence, and just feeling at that moment like I love this. Like I don't understand how they cannot see. I don't know. I did often, I think, feel the same way when I was I guess when I was engaging with art, you know, like when it came to books, when it was you know, like music. And then too, I think that I like you, that I also appreciated when it came to my family, you know, because my mom, you know, she worked as a housekeeper for years. That's how she put me in that, you know, that like private you know, school, because we damn sure didn't have the money for it, right? And so, you know, there were times when I would go with her to work too, right? She's doing the same thing that your grandma was doing. And and it was very difficult to sit there and like see very clearly that the people that she works for did not consider her their equal in any way, shape, or form. You know what I'm saying? But then at the same time, like I see the fullness of her splendor. You know, like I understand her depth and and all that she has, you know, become and manifested in her life and worked really hard for to survive and thrive, right? And support four little ones, you know, like by herself. But so to sit there and see that they can't see that, you know, and they can't, you know, they don't even see her as like a full human being. She's just this, you know, this poor Black woman who lives in poverty. Like, I think that, you know, and beginning, you didn't have the land for it yet, but I was beginning to understand. I think, you know, that it, like, you know, like James Baldwin said, like you say, you know, I mean, it's an illness. It's a, I don't know.
And the hard part for me, cause it's like, you know, Baldwin always talked about you just have to accept. And as a young reader, I didn't even understand what he meant by like, sometimes you just have to accept the beauty. And, you know, conversely, Morrison, I think, is a practicum in acceptance of all of our beauty, right? And how the acceptance of all of our beauty necessitates different stylistic explorations of us. But one of the things I just need, I find joy sometimes in the fact that these folk controlled our formal education. You know what I'm saying? They controlled the means of productivity. They controlled so many things, but somehow, some way, like these folks we talking about still, you know what I'm saying? They still, like we still us. And like, that don't mean that like that they weren't sort of wholly successful. It definitely doesn't mean that they have not prematurely killed millions of our people. We gotta not just sit with that, we gotta hear that. And that's what I hear in your work a lot. But what it does mean is the fact that I can hear, you know, you talking about them speakers in that fucking little ass car, my G, like I heard it, I felt it. I'm shaking up in this motherfucker because like, yes. And like, I pity the motherfucker who don't understand that is Mississippi. You know, like I pity that person. And I actually think, I've been thinking about this today. I'm sad about the fact of how much pity is in like my vision of what I want to do as a writer. Sometimes people talk about like centering white folk. And I mean, I think we got to talk about that. But I just have like this deep anger and pity for those people's inability to see us, and much more like their inability to see like themselves, right? Like it's pitiful, and I don't have the wherewithal to try to teach them to see themselves unless the check is thorough. Do you know what I mean? And like, but we haven't talked about that. Like, do you feel ever like the necessity to sometimes show yourself and or where you're from to a group of people who consider themselves raceless, i.e. white folk? I don't read that in your work much at all, like ever actually, but do you ever feel that inclination?
I think I definitely did in the beginning of my career, you know, like when I first started out. Yeah, I think I did. I mean, I think, you know, it was different, I think, when I first started. I mean, I have trouble remembering dates, so I can't
That's right.
exactly, you know, like when my first novel was published, but like the landscape, the publishing landscape felt very different, you know, and it seemed like there weren't a lot of inroads. And I mean, you're familiar with that. Like that's part of the reason why, you know, we our careers sort of started in the same
Right
way, because you know, there weren't a lot of, you know, the publishing companies were not knocking down our door, you know what I'm saying? And then once they got the work, they weren't you know, they weren't putting the work into it to, you know, bring it out, you know, bring it to a wide audience, right? I mean, there are certain assumptions, I think, that even when we you know, got a foot through the door and like a walk through the door of like you know, of acceptance of the manuscript, you know, like so when they bought our manuscripts and decided to publish it, like I think that there were still, I don't know, like I think that there were still narrow ideas about who our work would appeal to, and
right
and who would appreciate it, and who it would resonate with, and who would engage with it.
right.
So I think that in the beginning, like I was very aware of I don't know, of how that outside audience would see my work. And sometimes I think, you know, I was aware of it. I mean, I think that part of like one of the things that I always felt when I was a younger writer, you know, that like brought me to want to do this, right? To want to tell our stories, you know, specifically Mississippi stories about poor Black people, you know, from Mississippi, was because I felt like I had never seen it before, you know, and you know, in popular culture, right? At least, you know, in the 80s, you know, and also I wanted the kind of people that I went to school with, you know, and the kind of people, you know, who I had like, you know, racist, interpersonal, interactions with. Like I wanted them to read my stories, to read about the people, you know, that I wrote about, and to realize, you know, and this, I think in the same way that I wanted, you know, like the people that my mom worked for, to look at her and to see her, you know, in all her, you know, grit and splendor. Like I wanted them also to, you know, to read about the people that I wrote about and see them in all their grit and splendor, and see them for who they really were. So yes, I mean, I think that when I first started out, like I was, I think, aware that I was writing, that part of the reason that I was telling stories that I was telling about the people who I was telling them about was because I wanted those people to read and to see. But I don't know, but as I've gotten older, I don't know. I feel like maybe my reasons are, I think that was one of my motivations. I don't think that was my main motivation when I was starting out, but I think that was one of the things that motivated me. But, you know, I think another one was like, you know, when we're just talking about, you know, like the car and the speakers and feeling that emotion, that upswell, that wave of emotion that you feel, where you just feel like the beauty and the power of that moment all at once. I think that more so, you know, than wanting to like communicate and create empathy in that outside audience, like more so than that, I wanted to communicate that, you know, like I wanted to write something that will make somebody feel that, like, or make somebody read it and just, you know, just be carried away by the beauty and the power of that. And so, I'm always working on that. Like I also, like I feel like my goal is to constantly evolve as a writer and constantly get better. And so I feel like, like I'm constantly working on doing that.
Right. And I think you constantly show us how like ritualizing the writing of the dead and death necessitates like mind in different styles, right? Like it's not like you can just hit the same note over and over again. And one thing I always think about your work, and I want to ask you this question too. I should ask privately, but like when you're writing like death, I don't just mean the death of humans, but animals, any sort of like decay, literal or metaphoric, any sort of death, like those passages in your work always appear to me to be like the most wonderfully, beautifully, intentionally crafted. And I think that could be me imposing my readerly sensibility on it, but I also wanted to know, like, are you more attuned to the way your writing works when you're writing into death and loss? I want this question to maybe go into like what they asked us about trauma.
I don't. Let me look at that question.
Okay.
help me answer it.
I try to, I'll start off and say that because I don't want to. I mean, I think artists exploit the dead, and we hear the dead. I don't think exploit is a bad word at all. I think we're supposed to hear and channel and create. But sometimes when I'm working with death, I'm doing that a lot now. I just feel like I have to be a lot slower with the process. I got to be a lot more meticulous about what verbs I use. I want the verbs to push, like propel. I want the verbs to kind of slow down. Don't want the verbs to create an ache. And I need to do that with everything, but I find myself doing it much more when I'm writing about the dead. And so I wondered if, because you write generally better than anybody I know on earth, but you especially write about the dead and the living world surrounding that dead. So I wondered if you actually were attempting to write those scenes a bit more meticulously than you write other scenes.
I mean, I do feel like there's a syncing that happens in those scenes. When I'm writing those scenes where you sync and things slow down, and like you're saying, like you're aware of your verbs and the work that they're doing. You're aware of the rhythm of the words, the internal rhymes, between the words as they come along in the sentences, right? And you're paying attention to all of that. You're aware of how one image is affecting another image and then the next image, and then how all of them are like accreting and building and producing this effect. So yeah, but I think, and I think part of the reason that is the case is because when you are approaching those scenes, when you're writing those scenes, you come to them with a certain sense of respect, like you are respecting these characters, you're respecting the people that you write about, you're respecting this moment, this traumatic, moment, sometimes of transition, like if you're writing specifically about death, like but you have to, and I know that, like you have to respect it because you just have to, like I mean, because I think the weightiness of that very experience, like you're aware of it as you are writing about it, like you're aware of the repercussions and the reach, that moment will have, for the characters, for the place, for the community, for you as a writer, for readers in the outside world, like, you carry all that in that moment. And so I think that because that's why, like you sink in that moment and you take your time and, because of that respect, and in a way it's like it's an honoring, I think,
And I'm interested in how that honoring works often, in reaction to, like, for me at least, like state-sanctioned desire for premature death of our people. You know, sometimes when you think about the folks around me, I don't want to put this on you, but when I think about the folks around me who died, I can't think of anyone who's died who has not died prematurely, partially from white supremacy. And so once I accept that everyone I know who has died before they were supposed to die, because white folk, not white power, not white supremacy, because white folks want it that way. When I'm approaching this shit, I'm just like, yo, I don't want to be reactionary, but I also do not want to treat the dead the way they were treated when they were alive. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And that lingering. And one of the things that we have to do, that I think culture encourages us not to do, and that's ironic about like the booming system, is like, when I used to be in them cars, like little Mazda RX-6s and shit, and the backseat was speakers, my nigga, like that shit was like linger, like the scenes would be so long if I wrote that scene out. Time collapsed. Yeah. And I feel like when we're crafting these worlds, or attempting to craft these worlds, because we're aware of the worlds that these characters lived in, we kind of want to slow it down and linger and find foes in people and places that those folk couldn't find foes in, you know? Yeah. And I find that in your work so much. Someone asked about college. Said both of y'all left the South for college and returned. How did your relationship to the state change while you were away? You want to talk about that at all?
I don't know. You know, one of the first things that I thought about that was when I first went away to school, because I went to school in California, in the Bay Area. And when I first went away to school, I almost felt like in a way, it was before I left. How do I say this? So when I left, that distance enabled me to be more clear-sighted and clear-eyed about Mississippi, you know, about about what it means to be Black in Mississippi.
Right.
You know, and specifically, I guess, you know, Black and poor in Mississippi.
Right.
In ways that I think I was not able to be so clear-eyed and clear-sighted about before I left. And I think part of the reason why was because I was just like mired and I think in certain ways felt trapped,
right,
by all those systems, you know, that you were talking about earlier, right? Because it's not just about interpersonal racism, you know,
right,
like it's about everything in your life. It's about, you know, eating, you know, cornflakes and powdered milk, you know, in government cheese your whole life. It's about the only time you eat a fruit, it's either a raisin or a mealy apple, you know, like it's about, you know, not having good health care. It's about never having access to mental health care. It was about, you know, like my mama finding a way to get me a better education because the public schools that were, you know, around us at the time that I would have been going to, like, they weren't offering, you know, educate, you know, like you weren't getting a great education.
yeah.
I don't know, like it's about like my parents having to go back and live with my grandmother again and again and again, because it was difficult for them, like with the jobs that they had that were available to them, you know, that they worked and worked really hard at. Like it was difficult for them to have a nuclear household and to sustain a household, you know, and to pay rent and to, you know, and that's not even like talking about like how difficult it is to actually build and own your own house in the place where I'm from. That's why we got to keep going back to grandmama's house, you know, that built in the, you know, 1950s and doesn't have insulation or central air, central heat. So see, now I feel like I done went off on a tangent.
Yeah, that's what we here for, fam. Like I'm feeling that, because you know what, Jesmyn, when you said that, I thought like my mama was 19 and my father was 20 when they had me, and I was at Jackson State, and you know, they went to grad school. My mama graduated early. She went to grad school with my dad up in Wisconsin for 4 or 5 years. And I spent a lot of time at my granny's in Forest. But like when I got kicked out of college, I got kicked out of a school called Millsaps, and then I went to Jackson State for a semester. And sometimes I just think about like the narratives that we like step into versus the narratives that we create. Because for the life of me, sometimes I'm like, wait, why did I leave Jackson? Because I was one of those kids who like, I feel like partially because my mama, like I did not want to leave Jackson, much less Mississippi. Because for me, we talk about those Mississippis, and Mississippi, my Mississippi was Jackson, right? So I couldn't imagine leaving that city. And granted, I went to school in a part of Jackson that I'd never really been to, you know, school called Millsaps, ironically in the middle of my city. But when I went to Oberlin, like you, in this weird sort of way, sometimes I hate when I'm a cliche. You know, people's like, you got to get away to see your shit. But like, I had to get away, fam. Like I didn't want to go away. But when I got away, one of the things what I really experienced was like Mississippi, like intense Mississippi pride in the face of, you know, lovely, wonderful Black folk from the coast, East Coast, West Coast, and they were repping their regions in their art. And then I was like, oh shit, well, what I'm gonna do, you know? And I didn't come from the Bays. Like I came from a place that folks sort of neglected. And I think that made me double down on exploring the like folk ways that eventually led to the creation of some of the art that we have. I'm not sure where we are in terms of time, but this is one thing about returning to the American South, and I think that's tied to that question that Donald asked. And you know, I've told you this so many times, but you know, you went to Agate, I went to Agate. You went with Caffey, I went with Caffey. You went with Lyceum, I went with Lyceum. You got the Grisham Fellowship, I got the Grisham. At some point, I'm gonna have to quit following you and do my thing. You came back to Mississippi to live. A few years later, here come my big ass, like, cause we here. But I'm at this place now where I'm like, and we've talked about this before, but I kind of want to put a little bit more voice to it. I don't know, fam. I mean, part of it is because I came back to a Mississippi that's not mine.
Yeah.
And I don't live up there with nobody. You know what I'm saying? That same house that you lived in for a little while. I've been in that fucking house for 4 years by myself. I'm not putting it on nobody else. I made that decision. But I'm not sure sometimes what it would mean to leave again, you know? And my people are like, motherfucker, it don't mean shit. Like, don't nobody care. Go do your thing.
Yeah.
But then there's something else in me that says, okay, true, but. And I just wonder, as someone who's made a home back at home, like made a home at home, do you ever worry and or wonder about leaving?
All the time.
All the time. Can we talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah, we can talk about that. I mean, you know, I guess I think part of the reason that I think about it, but it never, that leaving never happens, is because of my kids. Right. You know, I have 2 kids. They're really young, but you know, we travel a lot for what we do, right? Yes. We go all over the country. Sometimes I'm speaking at high schools. Often I'm speaking at universities, colleges, right? Same thing, right? And so when I'm in these other places and I'm able to see what is available there, you know, like what is available, you know, academically, culturally, and then when I compare that to where I come from, right, where the options even now are limited, right, as far as, you know, it's like where my kids will go, you know, to school, what and you know, and then all of that, right, informs, I think, what they think is possible, what they are, as they get older and as they begin to, you know, sort of develop their own understandings of the world, right? Like what they think is possible for them in this world. And so I think that sometimes, like, I feel that urge to leave because I worry, you know, and because I I worry about what Mississippi, this Mississippi, you know, the Mississippi that they live in, like what that Mississippi will tell them about what the world is and what is possible for them in the world. But it's hard. Like it's hard right now, again, because they're young, right? I live around my family, my immediate family, my extended family. I am ensconced, probably pronouncing that word, in a community, you know, and right now I really need them. You know, I just lost my partner last year. Like I need them to, I need their help, you know, I need their support, I need their love. And so I stay, right? But I feel like it's you know, that debate about leaving or staying, like that's something that I will continue, I don't know, that I will continue to have. I mean, I think that part of the reason, another reason that I sort of stay home is because of my work, you know? Like I feel like one of the things that I'm really afraid of is that I will get older, I will continue to write, but I'm afraid that my work will become less honest.
Wow.
And therefore just less, period.
Wow.
And part of the reason that I think that I'm really invested in staying where I am and as I continue to create is because I feel like being around my family, being in my community, you know, which is still semi-rural, you know, everyone still working class and poor, you know, and Black, that I feel like, you know, that keeps me honest.
Yes.
I don't want to lose that. I mean, I know I could work at keeping it when I'm in other places, but there's something about living there in the middle of it, you know, day in and day out, I think that makes me accountable, and keeps me honest. And so I think about that.
Yeah,
too.
That's we might have to talk about that off screen because that's it. And like I'm so afraid of leaving Mississippi because, you know, I started doing this work in Mississippi, left Mississippi for about 20 years. But when I came back home, no matter what the fuck was going on in the North or whatever's happening in our state with these ridiculous ass politicians, fam, like the work just was better. Like I just create better work at home, though I haven't figured out yet how to take care of my heart at home. And so I use my writing and my art to take care of the heart. As we know, that's not a sustainable practice. So I'm figuring it out. But what you said is just real. I worry sometimes about what happens to the work when you leave. Yeah.
Maybe try to split the years somehow. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how feasible that is, but I've thought about that too. Like I wonder if at a later point in my life, you know, where my kids are older and where my life is a bit more flexible, whether I end up doing that. You know what I'm saying? Like be at home for 6 months and then be somewhere out in the world for 6 months. But I don't know.
But we can do that, right? I need you to tell me that. I need you to tell me that that's not against the rules.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. Right.
I'm sorry. This is such an amazing conversation that it's like I've been trying to just come in, but I'm also reading the chat, comments in the chat. And I mean, you should definitely read it after you're done because the audience is really responding to this in the most amazing way. We also have a number of Q&A questions that came in as you were speaking. Since we have only a few minutes of your time left, I wanted to make sure that at least we have a couple of them in. So I'm just going to read the first few that came in. I'm going to ask you, of course, to respond to them. But again, this is lovely. This is wonderful. Yes. So, yeah. And so this is a question from Bianca Leon. And her question is that for both, for both writers, Kiese and Jesmyn, what are the tools or advice you would give to young writers crafting their own narratives? how do you prevent someone or institutions from writing your life story for you? So that would be my first question.
You want to take that one, Kiese?
You know, I think you I encourage young writers to articulate what it is they hate about reading and writing. I think sometimes we don't spend enough time. Well, I know in school I wasn't given any time to articulate what I did not like about reading and writing. You know, I was only asked to talk about what I did like about that tiny slice, which is important. But what fueled me was partially the desire to imitate the shit I liked, but much more fuel was like I wanted to write myself out of American literature, the way American literature had written me. Thankfully, American literature invisibilized me. So I just needed to like, you know, grab some shit and some sounds and some shapes that I hadn't seen before. But I think find what you don't like and use that shit to create wonder and beauty. I think hatred gets a bad rap when we're talking about aesthetics and art. I think we should find shit that we hate, particularly when it's created by people who hated us, and let that shit fuel you, not to write in reaction to folk, but to write, but to reclaim space. You know what I'm saying? Like those people had too much space and they never had to compete against us for space. So I refuse to come up in there and imitate them, you know. And I would encourage younger writers to do a version of that, honestly.
I asked Kiese to answer that because, I mean, I don't know if y'all know, but he's one of the best writing, you know, teachers. You know what I'm saying? Like that ever encountered. So much better than me. I struggle. But yeah, I do. I don't know. I think that that's important, you know, like what you're saying, to like to let, you know, find what you hate and let that fuel you too. I don't know. I think that this is going to be like the lame answer, but I think something that has served me well is just doing the work. Yes. You know, like figuring out that in order to find my way to my voice and to, you know, creating books, you know, novels and memoirs and, you know, books, like that's work. I have to do that work every day, you know. I have to exercise that voice every day. I have to, you know, embrace what I love in writing and let that come to life in my writing, and avoid what I do not every day, in order to you know, in order to come into my own, you know, in order to write about this, write the stories that I really care about, and write the realities that sing to me. So I don't know. So I think, again, boring answer, but I think that like that exercising your voice consistently, that's really important.
Absolutely.
Thank you. There are a number of questions that actually you kind of addressed actually to your discussion. A couple of questions about home, which you've kind of and also about writing as a ritual in casting, conjuring. So I will skip some of those questions just because I think you've addressed them quite wonderfully. So I'll move towards a few questions that came a little later. And one of them is the following. And you both wrote memoirs. When you both wrote memoirs, respectively, what was a moment or scene that you wrote about that you felt that you most loved? And what scene did you feel? And what scene did you feel like you were most loving to those you're writing to?
Oh, I can jump in there real quick with that joint. You know, I wrote this chapter. You know, sometimes we write just to get to the image. And for me, when I was writing heavy, there was this image of my mama. We just come from the grocery store. She found, I'd seen that she bounced a check and blah, blah, blah. We didn't end up getting any food because she had a bounce check in the grocery store and she was mad, embarrassed. But to me, when I was thinking about that scene, the most important part was how it ended. Like my mama let me drive for one of the first times. I was like 12, 11. we got home, she was asleep. When I used to be sleeping in the passenger seat, my mom sometimes would put her hand under the fold of my knee. And I remember doing that, and we fell asleep in the like driveway of where we stayed. And for me, that meant so much. But for my mama, all she saw was the part about me shaming her, telling people that her check bounced. And so I just think sometimes, you know, if I could do that over again, I would summarize that scene and not dramatize it. I think the dramatization is what really fucked it up, but I would still get to that same point. So that's just an example of like a scene that, or an image that I love, but it didn't do any, it actually hurt my family. And so I want to redo that scene, but we'll see. Yeah.
I don't think I can answer that question because I feel like the emotion, you know, of love buoyed me through the writing from scene to scene throughout Men We Reaped. That I think that is what actually enabled me to get through it, you know, and to do it. So yes, I don't think I can answer that one because I felt that, you know, that sense of love, and I don't know, it probably even like edging over into awe, you know, in most of the scenes, although there are plenty, you know, like you're saying, Key, where I, you know, where I think wrote scenes and wrote them from a place of love, and where, you know, sometimes the people who were in them, you know, it was hard for them, I think, sometimes to see them that way. And maybe, you know, maybe part of that reason is because of like what you're saying, right? Like the way that you know, the creator, that you're sort of perceiving a moment that you're writing about is not, you know, that's not necessarily the way, you know, that the other person in that moment perceived moment. So
do you feel like Men You Reap, I know I'm breaking term, but like, do you feel like Men You Reaped in terms of degree of difficulty was your hardest?
oh
No doubt.
oh no doubt,
Yeah
definitely. At that book, writing that book, it felt like I was like crawling crawling over just crawling down a road of just asphalt that hadn't been paved in 15 years. And I mean, it is easily the hardest thing that I have ever written. And when I was done, I remember people would ask me if I would ever write another one, and I immediately said no. I mean, first of all, it was hard because I didn't know what I was doing. When I first started writing Men We Reaped, you know, I mean, one of the reasons one of the things that has always impressed me about your work is that you are like, you're so good at form and structure and getting to the heart of a moment, and then also, you know, including like developing these profound revelations, you know, throughout your work, and also being just very sort of honest and frank, but at the same time, you know, the imagery and the language is so beautiful. Like there's just so much. I mean, it's amazing, right? And I was not there. Like I didn't know what I was doing at all. So I you know, that's why I had to write so many drafts. And the first one completely missed the mark. But yeah, that was easily the hardest thing that I've ever written. First of all, because I didn't know what I was doing. And second of all, because I was writing about trauma. You know, I was writing about such traumatic experiences, and it's hard to sit with that.
And without that though, I mean, sing, I just can't even imagine how we get to that, how we get to sing without, like, I'm talking about the script, like the structural shit, like the redoing and having all of these multiple characters who appear to be secondary, but who are actually like primary characters taking the stage. I don't know, fam. Like I saw like the tapestry for sing In Men We Reaped, which is
Really?
why to me, it still feels like the hardest book in the world that I could ever write. Like I could never write that shit, you know? Like, yeah. All right, y'all. We've been talking. Are we over
Yeah.
time? I
No,
forgot
we
was
have
on.
like 2 more minutes, and there was actually
Okay.
one question that I wanted to ask just because it's so apropos. So maybe 1 minute each, if that's even possible, right? But that last question is, has this pandemic drastically changed your writing, the way you write it or the way you approach your writing? If again, if anything quick can be said in response to that question, and then we'll leave you to your own time.
I just want to write beautiful shit more than ever in my life because, you know,
Yeah.
I could be gone tomorrow. You know, I'm a big ass boy. My granny could be gone tomorrow, which is the main thing. I just want to write beautiful shit more than ever. I want different points of entry into the beauty. I don't want it to be rote and fucking like mechanic, but more than any time in my life, I just want to write shit that Black people, particularly Black folks in Mississippi in the Deep South, like that they just like, yo, this shit makes me feel beautiful. That's what I want to do. I didn't want to do that before the pandemic. And that's all I'll say about that.
Okay. Well,
No,
okay.
I agree. Like, I think that, you know, that the pandemic I mean, I've been, you know, I feel like I have been dogged by death my entire life. And so, you know, but the pandemic just sort of, I don't know, was more of the same, but in a more intense way, because I think that it made me realize, you know, that again, as death has taught me throughout my life, you know, that I'm not promised anything. I'm not promised to wake up tomorrow. Neither are any of these people who I love with everything in me. And so, you know, like Kiese, like I just want to tell stories, you know, again, like tell beautiful stories that hopefully I want to tell stories that transport people, you know, that make them feel alive, you know, and it might not always be comfortable and it might not feel good in the moment, like when you're reading it, right? Like you might be aware of being alive and there might be some pain in it, but I don't know. I think there's worth in that. So yeah, so I just
Thank you, God.
Thank you. This is
Thank you,
really
guys.
amazing. I wish again we were here.
We love each other. I love kids.
I love Jesmyn. I hope you know, man.
That's my cousin.
That's my squad right there. It's all love, yo. Thank y'all.
Thank you very much for doing this program for Clark Atlanta University, Augusta University, Jackson State, and the Lighthouse Company. We have thoroughly enjoyed it and look forward to uploading the recording and your sound recording that you will do for us as well to share with the public. Have a wonderful day and thank you. Wonderful
Thank you very
program.
much.
Bye-bye. Oh, wow. Oh my